Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And welcome to another fantastic episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join with me and my guests as we talk about the people, events, and organizations make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. And one of our gems here in town is my friend and yours, Jury Love. She's a phenomenal person who does so much for our community. She writes, she acts, she performs, she gives so much of her time. And she's also a survivor of rape. And she's been on this program before talking about her experiences with her family and as she came to America. Every once in a while, you get the opportunity to meet some people whose story must be told. And this is one of those times through Jury I've met three wonderful people. And so let me introduce them to you. First of all, I would like to introduce Julia Rayberg. Julia, you are joining us tonight as a rape survivor. And we're going to be talking about your story and some of the things that go along with that type of violence. Mm-hmm. So, and then I'm also honored to be joining us, and you're also a volunteer with us here as well. So Adiola Olifikun.
Yes.
Oh, I got it right. Thank you so much. And we are also a survivor of violent rape, and we are also honored to meet my new friend, Rooney. Rooney, it's great to meet you, Saha, and you are also a survivor.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. So we are honored to be joined, and this is one of those topics where normally I'll have a website to throw out there. I'll have a sponsoring organization, a reason why you should, either write in or contribute or volunteer. We don't have that tonight. This is more of an opportunity to teach and educate and learn. So I would like to learn, and I suppose the best way to do that is to simply talk and have an honest conversation. So Julia, you are a survivor of rape.
Yes, I am.
Are you comfortable telling us about that, or?
Yes, of course. So actually, about maybe now 8 weeks ago, I was drugged and raped. I don't remember, over 10 hours, and it's difficult to put into words, but I think that women need to talk about it, and it's really difficult to. I don't necessarily need to go into the details, but it was a horrific situation, and immediately as a woman I felt shame. I felt I was in denial. I didn't want to believe it. I had to believe it because I actually had a transmitted disease from it, and I had to act very quickly to take care of that. I was in Guatemala. I was without family, and I quickly learned that the people who took advantage of me in that way were very dangerous people, and my life was immediately in danger. So I was, trying to deal with all sorts of different emotions, but I felt very lost, out of control, with a legal system that does not support the woman and makes you go through some horrific situations, even here, to prove that you were raped, forensic exams and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I decided to write about it 10 days following my rape, and I published it, and it ended up being picked up by a lot of different outlets, and thousands of people started contacting me about their stories, about their rape, men and women. And it became evident that this is not something that people don't go through. We just don't talk about it. Mm.
We here in Foxborough had a community issue where we had a trusted teacher, scout leader, and leader of the local swimming hole here who was a decades-long abuser and a pedophile. And then when he was, back then, the response was to run people out of town, and then he offended in the next community. Luckily, that community stood up and dealt with it. And since then, we here in Foxborough have learned a lot, but talking about it is so key, because without that communication, people can comfortably sweep it under the rug. And that's why it's interesting that we're having this uncomfortable program, because there has to be an understanding that it's not acceptable, but also it's also not acceptable not to talk about it, not to learn from it, not to recognize that there is violence out there, and violence takes many forms. This clearly is something that horrible happened to you, but if we don't talk about it, then how do we
Can't
move
be
forward?
taboo.
Right. So with this incident happening in another country, in Guatemala, I think you said, what does the legal system down there do to support you on this, or do they not?
Well, no, I mean, yes and no. I'm very accustomed to the corruption because I've lived there for quite a few years. So it didn't really totally surprise me, but I will say that, you know, these people have been able to pay the police, they're not captured, they are still free. I was interrogated for 6 hours because I did press charges, and I'm in a legal trial, interrogated by 6 hours by lawyers, just forced to tell the story over and over and over every day. And that's no different than it is here.
Re-victimizing the victim, sure.
Yeah, so I mean, although I was raped in Guatemala, the women go through the same thing no matter what country they're in. So that needs to be addressed. And I will say that I came full force at this situation because a few years prior I was in a situation where something similar happened, and I immediately felt shame. I was embarrassed. I ended up having a drug and alcohol addiction problem after it, and I went numb because I couldn't handle it. And I took care of myself and worked for 5 years to build a very healthy life that made me happy. And I felt that my security and my innocence was just taken from me, and I had no option. And it really, really made me mad. So I think all of that went out into making sure that we're going to see justice in this situation.
And anger can be an emotion that's used or can be harmful, because if you turn it inward, then you talk about the addictions and you talk about using coping mechanisms. And it's so unfortunate because it's something that happened to you. It's not something that you did.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part of this, is that you didn't ask for it to happen, and yet now you're in this situation, I would imagine.
Yep.
So you also wrote about this, and you told me before the show that it's if you type in certain words to Google, that your story will come up. What is that again?
How do you put rape into words?
And so, and I did that right before, and it's true. How to put rape into words, and it'll be on Google. So if you want to hear more about Julia's story, that would be the greatest way to do it most directly. So thank you for sharing. We're going to come back, of course. I want to talk to Adiola. How are you tonight?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
So listening to Julia, are we talking something similar? Or are we? What is the story? Well, I guess we should say.
Yeah, well, I just don't want to cry because each time the conversation comes up, it's so disheartening, and I don't know how to put it in words. Thankfully, she can do that, but everybody's not that strong to do that.
No, they're not.
And
which interesting that you say that, because I think there's a wish. There's always a wish that everybody could do just absolutely the right thing. And the problem is that if you get 20 people in a room, 20 people are probably going to have 21 different solutions as to what the right thing is, right?
yes.
And those are people who aren't even involved. And then you get to a victim standpoint, or even a perpetrator standpoint, and there's so many different ways you look at it. From the victim side of it, what is the right thing? I mean, for you, the right thing may be a path, but that path doesn't work for other people. So what path did you take?
Oh, well, after the rape, because I was actually raped at gunpoint, and some other things. I was coming back from my school that year, and in Nigeria, in my country, in my school area there was no transportation. There was there was transportation problem, so someone offered transportation for me to get into my hostel, and I followed the person, coupled with some friends. So. And on the way, I never knew they were cult guys. Like, they were cultism. They were into cultism, and they drove into a motel, and I couldn't do anything. I was helpless. I shouted, screamed, and they did all manner of things. And finally, it was getting dark, and I didn't know what to do. I had to go home, and So the next day, I took it to my roommate. Then, she said she urged me to go to the police station to say it out. Okay, I went to the police station because, the corruption state of this country is so unbelievable. They tell you you are the one at fault. They blame the victim, the way you're dressed. They said the way you seducing them. So along the line, when they invited the guy who raped me and the other guys, also he told them that he paid me. I couldn't get any evidence against him. I don't have anything. I don't have any proof against him to shut him down. Like, you didn't pay me. It was his word against mine. I couldn't see anything because that was the situation of things going on around there. Like, okay, he lied that I'm a prostitute. I got so that got into me and I went from one police station to another area, like to place the report. Maybe they're gonna take the matter serious.
Sure.
But the guys came threatening me, writing letters to me, texting me, and if I take it more than this, if I speak out, they're gonna do something. They're gonna harm me, and I had to give up on the matter and just let it go like that. So I had to go home for about 6 months. I couldn't go back to school because I was scared. I didn't know what was coming. I had to go from the hostel that I went somewhere else because there is nobody you can tell that will believe you. Nobody. Even the police were like, okay, you're a beautiful girl. They wanted you. Maybe you were too pompous, or you were not allowing them. You understand? So those kind of things. So nobody will believe you outside your family or whatever. So it's something devastating, and the state at which people take it, especially the law enforcement, they are not doing anything. Especially in Nigeria, they don't take it as if you cry out, they're just gonna shun you down. Like, you're a lady. You should expect they take you as they take you as a person that is at fault of whatever case it may be. It's so.
And I think that has to be the worst, to not be believed, because whenever it's one word, if my word against somebody else's, and I know what I've done, what I did, what the truth is, for people not to believe you, that's such a cut, because you're a good person, you've done the right things, and then this happens to you, and then for them not to believe you.
Yes, that's the worst part of it. You just have to stop talking, because anytime anyone you tell about it, they don't believe you. That's the major thing going on. They don't believe you that you are not at fault. It's not your fault. It's the person's fault. It's the perpetrator's fault. But I don't know.
So they were never brought to justice?
No, they were not.
And you had to move on and move out?
Yes, I have to move on, And that caused so many things, Moving on, with other relationships, you don't trust. You have trust. Even the person you're in a relationship with, start having doubts. Are you pregnant? What's next? All those kind of. Because when that thing happened, I had a boyfriend then. When I told him about it, it started changing. But I know it's not his fault. Situation of things, and and what the police said, because they invited him also. What the police said, that, and what the case that was on ground, like the perpetrator said, I was paid for that. So nobody believed me, so I had to okay.
And in your case, did the police didn't want to believe you either, or?
I think it wasn't a matter of believing as much as it was just more like they didn't care. They didn't really care.
Which I guess is even worse. It's accepted.
Money is power. The rapists are paying them, or the rapist's family member is the police chief. So it doesn't matter. And and it doesn't ever leave you. It affects every relationship in your life, no matter what.
Rumi, how are you doing?
Good.
So we've been listening to some tough stories.
Yes, yeah.
Would you care to share?
Absolutely. So, like you said, violence has many forms, and in my case, it was very different. I was actually molested for years by someone I trusted, and worshipped the ground he walked on. It was my uncle. And and I grew up in a wonderful family. My parents were, sheltered me. And I was terrified because I thought that I was going to, bring shame to the family. I didn't want to reveal what he was doing. He was my mother's sister's husband.
Okay.
And he was an upstanding citizen. He was an extremely successful doctor and an amazing family man. He was the rock of our family. But I just endured everything, thinking that I wasn't going to, if I said something, my family was going to be devastated. So I kept it all to myself. I did not, however, let him rape me. He tried, but I was able to ward it off at 12. But, I am really here to say, and I actually wrote about it. I'm a blogger for the Huffington Post.
Okay.
So I waited for 30 plus years
Really?
to talk about it. And it wasn't because, it was because I wasn't ready.
Sure.
And this is what, everybody deals with,
It's a different path to healing, but
it's absolutely. And I didn't believe that, I thought I was a strong person, but I just couldn't. I couldn't bring it up, with anybody. I couldn't. I just kept it inside, and I would.
Yeah, but strength takes many forms, though. At 12 years old, you're not expected to make those types of decisions and make those types of fending somebody off. And when did, if you don't mind me asking, when did the abuse start?
It started when I was about 11.
So, okay, so at that age,
Yeah.
either pre-puberty or right at puberty, it's not something you expect, particularly with an uncle who you've had holidays with, you probably went on vacations with. It sounds like the family was close and all.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, it was more than that because he had pretty much, my uncle and aunt, they didn't have any kids. They tried and, they were not able to conceive. So they pretty much took me under their wings, and I was their
Which is even
surrogate
worse
daughter.
because, as you said, you worshiped the ground you worked on and had that trust shattered like
Yes,
that.
yeah. So, and I would spend, a lot of days, nights with them at their home. And I do believe now, I kind of had an inkling that my aunt knew about it. There were some heated discussions between them. But again, she felt the same way, that probably, she wasn't going to reveal what a monster her husband is. There's no doubt in my mind that she knew. But for years, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to shame anybody. I didn't want to, and I kept thinking it was my fault. How come, he wasn't doing this to others, which I am doubtful that he didn't. So, I'm sorry. Sorry. But, so eventually I decided, and I actually waited for my mom after she passed away. I just didn't want to hurt her.
Isn't that interesting, though,
Yes,
because you took it upon yourself to protect the family when you're the one who's being violated?
Absolutely. And on top of that, I think it was the guilt that, if he did that to me, someone who absolutely worshipped him, I wonder what he had done.
Particularly as a doctor, which it's horrible to think of, but again, we have to talk about this and have to be open about it. But then you want to say, and this is going to come off strongly weird, so don't. But you had a relationship with him, whereas that was a work environment. So it was not only a targeting issue, but accessibility and opportunity, which I suppose is, either manufactured or in this case, just the way your family was.
Right, and I did. Growing up, we heard rumblings about this particular man, and how he is, not attracted to women, but just the way he deals with women. He's a little flirtatious, but again, everybody dismissed it as his quirkiness, and that's how he is, and he loves to be around women. But I have no doubt that he must have violated, not just people in my family, but other people, and now we know with, gymnastics and everything that's going on, right?
Yes, USA Gymnastics,
Yeah.
so many other cases, church, and everybody who has an opportunity. Here in Foxborough, we have, through the YMCA, a program called Darkness to Light, and we as a town, we're the first community, and there's several others that have picked up on it. But anybody who works with children, anybody who has access to through a volunteer role or through a daycare or a church. Somewhere else, I have a theater up the road, so we do the same thing. We try to implement something called Darkness to Light. It's a program, 2 Deep Leadership, that sort of thing. But there's still always an opportunity to be wrong and to do the wrong thing. And so the 3 of you sitting here having this conversation with us is a demonstration of no matter what kind of precautions you take, the wrong thing can still happen. And certainly with a family, I mean, you had parents that loved you and protected you. You said overly protected you. So how could that have possibly happened? And how could you have been victimized if that's the case? Didn't your mom know? And these are things that you probably have already asked yourself, but then you protected her by waiting until she passed away before you talked. So isn't that interesting?
And the guilt.
You were very
too.
strong going through this.
Well, I don't
As you
know.
dealt
I
with
mean,
this.
That's
whether
strength.
strong or
That's strength. You kept that. We are strong because you know what? You protected your mother and held it to yourself, and that is strength. That's not easy.
And and after I published this article, I decided to send it to this man and a few of my family members. And the sad thing is that obviously by then they must have known, what he had done, and they decided to ostracize me. So on top of everything, there was one person.
Re-victimize the victim.
Yes, exactly. So there was just one person
What
I
a
heard
great
from.
recurring theme, huh?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so you've written about this in your blog for the Huffington Post.
Yes.
And if we wanted to learn more about your story, how would we do that?
So you can just Google Huffington Post, and it's titled "My Dear Family Members." So hopefully there's not more than one, but if you do Huffington Post, Rumni Saha, so My Dear Family Members. So
My dear family members.
My dear. So it was an open letter to my family members.
And you did this 30 years after the abuse occurred.
I kept it all in, yeah. And honestly, when I would hear people speak about their experiences, it was just a surreal experience. It was almost like an out-of-body experience. I didn't want to believe that it had happened to me. And it, ate away at me. It was just, it has a tremendous impact, no matter, the form it takes. It has the most horrific impact on one's psyche, anything you want to call it.
And future relationships, you're always thinking.
Absolutely, everything.
As you say.
It's
So 30 years, and yet you are comfortable, and immediately 8 weeks after the fact, it's a different path, but neither path is the wrong path.
No, yeah, and I think everyone processes things differently. For me, I felt so out of control and angry that I had nothing that I could do was going to make a difference except using my voice. We have rape all over the world. In Guatemala, women are very oppressed, and rape is not talked about, nor are the women believed. So I felt like I had an opportunity to make change in that country. I was put it on national news. I put my face out there, and it felt like my voice was the only power I had. It is a massive legal case now in Guatemala. And fortunately, being able to, and I'm not saying that everyone should speak up right away. I mean, you need to protect your peace and keep your strength and do it whatever way you need to do it. But in this situation, dozens of other women came forward who are victims of these same individuals and said, I never said a word, but they raped me too. And now they have multiple lawsuits against them, and they will go to prison for 60 or more years. So the thing is, and I do believe this, and you know what we have to go through as women is not right, it's not fair, it's disgusting, we feel shame, we lose the ability to enjoy sex. I mean, there are things that aren't talked about, but you know what? This is just the reality, and it happens every day. All 3 of us here are rape victims of outside the United States. I think it needs to be very clear that this happens every day in the U.S. I would be wrong to say 50% of the women I know personally haven't had sexual abuse or been raped in their life. I would say it's closer to 75. I've heard stats like 1 out of 1,000. That is not true. That is not true. Women just don't talk about it. But when you stay quiet, you empower a rapist. When you stay quiet, they continue to do it. So we need to be loud. We can't feel shame. We have to use our voice. We have to speak up. We have to demand change because, unfortunately, it's far too accepted, especially in universities.
And now with the new laws, the changes in the laws, now you don't automatically believe the victim, you
Yeah.
investigate, and this is recent, as
Mm-hmm.
recent as last week. So again, the burden is on us. We're the ones who are being doubted.
And you know what? There has to be evidence for someone to be convicted. I understand
Yes,
that.
the
But you
federal
also
law.
need to think about the victim. You just went through something horribly traumatic that you really can't even put into words. It's going to affect you for the rest of your life. And then to have to I told my story every day for 6 weeks. Every day I had to tell to an investigator, a police officer, a law officer, whoever it may have been, lawyers. And then I was handed this massive bill to fight to get justice, and leave my house. So it's like all these things that you need to face. I had to have an STD and take 4 antibiotics that scorched my skin because I was in the sun. It was just like all these things that happen at once, and I didn't ask for it. It's funny, doctors drug me and take advantage of me. It happened to be gynecologists.
Wow.
So, I think that we are all so strong.
Yeah.
We are all so strong. And I think that really as women, we just need to continue to use our voice and demand change, because this happens every day. And I had to have a forensic exam, and I was so upset because they wouldn't give me a male doctor. I had to stand there without clothes, have them do things that I can't talk about on television. And when I realized that they would not give me a female doctor, I denied it until I saw a screaming 5-year-old girl with her 12-year-old sister walk out of that room, both raped victims, and they had to just go through it. This happens way too often at ridiculous ages. It's not okay. We need to use our voice. So I went into that exam.
Wow. Adiola, you have heard these 2 stories, and then with your experience and not being believed, what did you do to deal with the emotional piece? Sorry, we made the comment moving on, but how did we move to here? How did we get to this point?
Yeah, I just, after the incident happened, after the case and, police investigation and no investigation as such, I moved out of the area and, so
So did you leave school?
Yes, I left school for
You left
about
school, you
6
left the
months.
area?
Yes, I left the area because I was scared they're going to harm me.
Of course.
Because they were powerful people, they were cultists, and they have people in government places, and so I had to run for my life, and later come back, start from where I stopped, and I gradually got over it. Like the only people that can believe me, I talked to them. Although my boyfriend left me then, but thank God I'm fine right now. I'm married, you say so, and it's not a good experience at all. It's not a good experience. When you're being raped, it affects you. It affects your entire system. It affects you. Sometimes when things that happen, things that come to your mind when you're intimate with your husband or with your spouse, anything, when it comes up, it just disarrange everything, and but I'm still working on it. The PTSD trauma is huge, is eating up, but
Well, I think that's where, as we had this conversation and we talk, and surely some people at home who are watching this have gone through, I mean, we have to, statistically speaking, have gone through the same experience.
Yes.
And there is a different path, but you made the mention you've gotten over it. But do you ever really, it's more of a, how do you compensate your life to be able to live with it? And if that's the case, then what advice can we give the people at home, if there is any, as far as how to be healthier and more comfortable with ourselves?
just speak out because when you put it in words, when you speak out, it leaves you gradually. It's like evaporating the pain, the trauma that is in. When you speak out, let people know about it, tell people about it so that they won't go in that right path. But there's nothing you can do to stop it. It's just going to happen. It's not your fault, but it's just an accident, and it's going to happen. You don't plan for accident. So when it happens, speak out. Go for medical treatment immediately. And let them get you tested and all the stuff, and afterwards.
It's interesting you say that accident because it is one of those things where I think historically, and you mentioned it, you mentioned it, she was wearing too short of a skirt, or she, clearly
Yes.
was asking for it because she went out drinking late, or she, that sort of thing. Violence is not an accident; it's an intentional act. But you're accidentally being in that situation.
Yeah,
or
I
being
mean the victim. Yes.
Yeah, so that's an interesting take on it, because that is true. Because we didn't wake up this morning saying, I'm going to be a victim of a car accident, or I'm going to be the victim of a pickpocket, or I'm going to be a rape victim today. You don't do that, and yet when it happens.
It happens.
No, and can I add to that?
Yes.
I think that it's really important to yes, touch on how women and men can cope from being raped and having sexual violence in their life, but the biggest thing is teaching men not to rape.
Rape, yes.
Because I can be out drinking at 2 a.m. and be wearing a provocative outfit, and I still have no right to be raped. I'm not asking for anything. And I really believe that no one expects their child to go and do that, but really at the ages of going into university, you need to talk to your kids, because you need to talk to the women, you need to talk to the men, because men need to understand that when a woman is really drunk, she doesn't have the ability to say no. You don't have a right to have sex with her, because that will affect her for the rest of her life, and that happens so often. But also just having respect for women. I mean, most men have respect for women and don't rape, obviously. But I think that what really needs to happen is we need to make it so that we need to change how people think about rape. I mean,
it needs to be a zero acceptance culture.
You're
and that education
destroying
has
a
to be
woman
out there.
when you do that. You're destroying her. But for him, it's like
Pleasure.
it's just a quick. It's nothing. And you know what? I'm sorry to say this, but more men than you would. Men that you would never think would do that have done that.
Yes.
And I think that also, just going to what you were saying, there's that maybe it's not so old school, or we wish it was more old school, but boys will be boys, and that's such a horrible thing to say, because there's no truth in that. The behavior that boys will be boys exhibit is acceptable or should be acceptable in today's society. And for that to be even said just kind of says you don't understand what the issue is. At least that's the way I take it. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wrote something on Facebook, on my account. I said, teach your boys not to rape, and I will teach my girls how to chop off balls. Like, I put that, and I got so many comments.
We can say that. That's okay. This is cable access.
Because
it's good.
yes, when a girl says no, it is no. Like, it is a rape. When you do it, when she says stop it, I don't want. If you do it, it's a rape. So many things. The publicity, the public need to know that, especially men, that even a husband can rape the wife, that, because yes, they can do that. So if I don't want it, don't pressure it, don't disturb me, don't. So things, people need to teach people, tell boys, tell guys, even ladies. I learned ladies to also rape guys. So and
here in Foxborough. We had scandal with our churches as well, but the one that I was referring to earlier, that was youthful boys that were being offended against. So it happens. Violence is not a sexual act; it's violence, and that's why it crosses. It doesn't discriminate exactly. So.
Yes.
Rumina, you had a 30-year path. How did you? And we talked about healing, but for those 30 years, how did you cope?
Like I said, I just kept it to myself, and it was the most.
But keeping it to ourselves doesn't necessarily mean that we're. I'm just going to compartmentalize it there. I mean, you were successful. You lived.
I did. I lived, and I pretended it didn't happen. So I was completely in denial.
But it was all back in there.
It was always. I mean, there wasn't a single day that I didn't think about it, because I had a wonderful childhood, and I couldn't believe that man, made me lose my innocence, and he was responsible for really smearing my childhood. in a lot of ways. So I had my wonderful childhood, and then I had this. It went hand in hand, and I couldn't believe that. I mean, how dare he? And that's what I couldn't understand. And and at that age, I mean, I have a 10-year-old. I can't even imagine.
But doesn't that really put in perspective? Because we
Yes.
look at what we all do in our lives, and this is what I did back then. Now you've got children. Whew, it makes you really double clutch and
Absolutely,
think, wow.
absolutely. And that's why, my biggest thing is I know you said that we're strong, but I didn't feel strong. I felt weak that I wasn't able to talk about it. But now that I want to make sure that that was the biggest mistake, that I just kept quiet, right? Quiet for the years that he was trying to do what he was trying to do. And also after, but I guess I wasn't ready. It's like grief, everybody deals with it differently.
Yeah.
We have the 4 stages, and you go through it.
There's no formula, right? Sorry, there's no formula. But so for me, my biggest thing right now is to make sure that people know that, girls, especially girls, young girls know that it's never okay. Never, no matter what, it's never okay for someone to violate you, that way. It's never okay, no matter what people say. That's the most private thing, your body.
Yeah.
And no one should make you feel uncomfortable or in any way, not just uncomfortable, but it's not okay.
It's not okay.
Yeah, we need to speak up, and we need to really educate our children.
And we need to tell our children that too, that it's not
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
I'm speaking with my new friends with Ms. Julie and with Adiola and with Rumi, and we are exploring some uncomfortable topics. But one of the things that we can take away is that if you are a victim, or if you suspect somebody is a victim, then there are outlets, or there are mandated reporters. There are also local police department here in the United States. This program doesn't have telephone numbers for you. This program doesn't have a crisis hotline for you, because depending upon where you live, the information will be different. But the key here is, I think the message we're trying to get out is to talk about it, and don't keep it under your radar, because if you do, then the situation is going to get better until you deal with it. And unfortunately, if you're the one who's the victim, you didn't bring it on yourself, but it happens and it needs to be dealt with. So each one of you 3 have dealt with it differently, and yet we've all come to a stronger, healthier, you're agreeing. This isn't radio, so you can nod, but so what's the next step for each of you as far as advocacy, or at least personal health?
I'm just trying to
Because
continue.
you're in the throes of it right now, so you're...
Yeah, so I'm just trying to be as loud as I can. My goal was to make as much noise as I could. I looked that person in the eye and I told him, you messed with the wrong woman, and you're gonna regret what you did. So I'm keeping my promise, and I will go back to Guatemala January 1st, where I will go on trial for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and pray that they will all get time in prison. Just continue to fight in Guatemala, and to use my voice so that other women can come forward and do the same, and men.
And it sounds like you've empowered a number of other women who have also been victimized to be confident, or at least comfortable enough to come forward and also join you
I've
with
been
this.
fortunate in that way. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we go into denial. I didn't believe that happened to me until about 3 or 4 days later, until my body told me, oh, something happened to you. You don't want to believe it. And even though I knew, even though my legs, my body were covered in bruises, I could say a lot more, but I won't. I didn't believe it. Your brain shuts down,
Sure.
and that's a normal reaction to trauma. But I think that we need to lose the shame. The first thing that I felt when I really connected everything, and that doctor looked at me and said, this has happened to you, I felt shame. How do I call my family from thousands of miles away? How do I comfort my mom? How do I prevent my dad from killing him? How do I tell them? How do I wait 6 months to find out if I'm going to have HIV or not? you know? So, I mean, there's just things like that. There's a battle, but all you can do is be strong, use your voice, and make sure you get justice. Do everything that you can to do it. Because if you stay quiet, you empower that rapist. There were dozens of other women that had been raped by these individuals, and I'm sure with all of us, the same situation.
Yes.
When we speak up, when we're loud, they're terrified of us.
Yes.
They're terrified. And you know what? They can't do it anymore.
And I think that's also a driving force to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else, if possible.
Yes.
Anil?
Yeah. Speak out. That's what I want to say. Speak out.
And you are a blogger with the Huffington Post. You've also written extensively about this. Did you want to share anything as we wrap up?
Just, if you see, especially for families, if you see anything off, make sure you trust the child, investigate, but believe the child first. That's key, that if you find anything, because I'm sure there were telltale signs, even though I tried to disguise it. And I just feel, especially in this day and age, I'm talking 30 years ago when it was harder, and now, with the Me Too movement and everything, it's so much easier. So do it, not just your child, but if it's a student, if it's anyone, someone in your church, in your community, you feel that something is off, trust that child, believe that child first, and then, talk to that person. And never become complacent, and always know that it's never, never, never your fault, no matter what the perpetrator is telling you.
Great messages, and let's all commit to making a zero rape culture for the future. Thank you so much to Julia Rayberg. Thanks for being out here. Adiola.
Olafikon.
Thank you. Thank you. And Rumisa, thank you so much for being out here. And thank you, everybody. I hope that this conversation was eye-opening and one that we can all learn something from. If you want to learn more, you can, of course, check this out on a repeat broadcast, or you can go to our website at www.fcatv.org. Watch this again. I know that there's ways through the Huffington Post or through Google to read more about their stories, but the key here is to be supportive and to believe. Till next time, Foxborough, have a great day.